Donald Trump is escalating his authoritarian crackdown. He's going after the media, liberal organizations, thought, and dissent itself. Look, I know what it's like to be on the other side of Donald Trump's hammer. I've been targeted by him directly, and I've seen his playbook up close. In this video, I will expose how he plans to wield power to crush dissent, why he hates free speech, and what we can do to build an opposition movement to stop him. But first, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay informed about how you can defend democracy. These are dark times in America. The most famous jailed dissident of the Soviet Union was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was a literary figure. He wrote novels. He was not an overtly political figure, but he was jailed because the Soviet Union could not tolerate in its midst someone who told the truth, someone who told about beauty, someone who expressed himself through literature without being subject to the Soviet censure. So he wrote, after he was released from jail, that one of the reasons he was put in prison in the Soviet gulag was because, quote, the lie has become not just a moral category, but a pillar of the state. If that resonates today, it is because Donald Trump is, if nothing else, a perpetrator of lies. And he wants those lies not just to be the moral foundation of his immoral movement, but he wants them to be pillars of the state. Look, when Donald Trump came to office 8 days later on January 28th, I wrote a piece for Democracy Docket in which I said, quote, across agencies and departments, political appointees and career officials would be asked to harass those who opposed him through denials of government contracts, slowed services, IRS audits, and in the most sinister instances, criminal investigations and prosecutions. We have seen each and every one of those things come true. In fact, it's much worse than even I expected and predicted in late January. We have watched as senior political officials from the government, from the White House itself, from cabinet agencies ranging from DHS to HHS, from the Department of Justice to the head of the FBI, we have watched them systematically signal that we are in a new phase, that it is not enough that Donald Trump will go after his political opponents. It is not enough that Donald Trump will use the federal government to settle scores. It is not even enough that he will use it to enrich himself and his family. But he is going to use the power of the federal government and all of its ancillary tools to wage a campaign against left-leaning groups, institutions of civil society, any organization or person who is willing to say something that is critical of him or with which he disagrees. And now we know he will also go after cultural figures, like late-night comedians. He has done that not once, but he has done it twice. He has done it through his own social media posts and through his chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. He does it, and all of these things, by saying out loud what he means. And while much of the legacy media ignores it or minimizes it or says he doesn't really mean it and we should take him seriously but not literally, the people who work for him take it literally over and over again. And unless those of us in the pro-democracy movement stand up and build a durable opposition, he is going to use the power of the state to crush dissent. All dissent. Not just dissent around him and his political campaigns and Republicans' efforts to win in 2026, but anyone who dissents from anything that Donald Trump does not like. He is going to make the lie the pillar of the state. Now, look, I need you not to get despaired. I need you not to give up. And I need you to watch to the end of this video because we're going to talk not just about what he is doing, but what those of us in the pro-democracy movement need to do to fight back. What you, who's watching this video, needs to do in order to prevent Donald Trump from achieving this sinister objective. But let's first go back a little bit in time and talk about how he started this weaponization of government. Donald Trump decided that the first thing he was going to do is destroy the big institutions of civil society. What were those? Those were law firms, they were universities, They were large media companies, they were business leaders, and they were the federal government. Now, it's interesting, the federal government, which he controls, was one of those institutions that people said, well, presidents come, presidents go, but the federal bureaucracy, is always there. It's protected. It is a guardrail. We heard all of that. Well, so what did he start with? He started with Doge. And what was Doge? Doge was never about saving money. Doge was never about efficiency. The whole idea that this was a department of government efficiency was a lie that he was trying to make the pillar of the state. It was about breaking the internal checks and balances, firing the watchdogs, getting rid of the experts, the people who know how to deliver government services. It was about getting them out of the way so that Donald Trump could weaponize the federal government more efficiently. If you want to misuse data collected by the federal government, what do? You have to get rid of the people whose job is to safeguard the data. And what did we see? We saw these Doge contractors going from agency to agency to agency, firing the people who were telling them, no, you cannot access everybody's Social Security information. No, you cannot access all the Treasury Department's information. We saw this systematic effort to gut from the federal government the people whose job were to protect you and the American people from government excess. They were there to prevent the government from becoming a tool of oppression against the citizenry. And those were the first people to go. Now, they weren't the only people to go. We have seen experts get purged as well, right? We saw experts, for example, who are in charge of vaccines. They've been kicked out and replaced by crackpots. Why? Because if you want the lie to become the pillar of the state, you need liars in office. And good civil servants will prevent liars from spreading their lies. I mentioned the law firms. Anyone who has seen my videos knows I have a particular disdain for the 9 large law firms that entered into agreements with Donald Trump to literally give him collectively $1 billion of free legal services, which he has now started to tap. All of those legal giants who strutted around saying, oh, we made this deal, but it doesn't mean anything, it won't change anything. That was always bullshit, but now we know it's bullshit because we have already started to see reports of how Donald Trump is deploying these legal resources not to help the needy, not to help the poor, not even to help the veterans or combat anti-Semitism, which was the nonsensical rationale that he offered. But no, he's using it to further his agenda. Anyway, I've had disdain for those 9 law firms that settled. But honestly, even beyond those 9 law firms, where is the legal establishment? Where are the large law firms? Why don't we see their names in captions in cases on behalf of migrants? Why don't we see large law firms in the captions in cases defending the people being attacked by this administration? Why aren't their leaders speaking up every day in favor of the culture of this democracy? Why are they remaining silent as we watch Donald Trump target the most vulnerable in cities around this country? Why are large law firms not standing up on behalf of the people who are being terrorized and who the federal government is persecuting and prosecuting? I'll tell you why. Because set aside those 9 law firms, Donald Trump got what he wanted. He got those 9 law firms to capitulate, and then he got another 90 law firms, 100 law firms, 200 law firms to say, you know what, we're going to take a step back and we're going to cower in the corner. So while democracy is under attack, we will do nothing. We will hope Donald Trump doesn't notice us, and we will simply stay silent. Well, this is a moment where silence is complicity, and they are no better than the law firms that overtly capitulated. The universities, I'm watching Harvard every day like a hawk. Harvard is so far fighting in court, and Harvard won, and Harvard needs to keep fighting and keep winning. And the universities that have bowed down to Donald Trump, what did it get them? It got them shame, it got them a loss of the dignity, and it got them nothing else. The media companies, the media companies told us a whole lot that their job was to report without fear or favor. Does anyone believe that ABC News is doing fearless anything? Does anyone believe when they and CBS pay $16 million apiece to Donald Trump to settle bogus lawsuits, they are not doing favors? What does it mean that they report without fear or favor? Report about what? Bird migration? They're certainly not reporting about this White House. They're certainly not defending their employees who are being attacked unfairly by this administration. No, they are in it for the money. And they are only in it for the money. You who think that they are there to provide you accurate news information or analysis, you're the sucker because you're putting money in their pockets and they are laughing all the way to the bank. It is time that we recognize the media conglomerates for what they are. They are businesses. They are for-profit businesses that do not care about anything other than their bottom line. And if that means they have to pay money to Donald Trump, they'll pay money to Donald Trump. If it means they need to fire Colbert or suspend Jimmy Kimmel, they will do that. There is nothing they won't do. They will claim to you, as sure as I sit here, when you're watching this video, they're going to claim to you, well, we just did this one thing because of this one reason. Bullshit. They will do anything Donald Trump tells them to do. Whatever it is. There is no red line. There's not even an orange or a yellow line. There is just a yes, sir, may we have another line. That's because they are taking their cues from the billionaires who own them. I mean, how many decades, how many centuries would it take Jeff Bezos to spend a quarter of his fortune? I mean, this is a guy who's never going to run on money. He could buy anything. He could buy a mega yacht every day. He could buy new planes every day. He could buy new businesses every day. He would never run out of money. And yet there he is destroying the Washington Post, destroying his reputation, sitting on a stage behind Donald Trump, sucking up to this guy. For what? So that his space company can make a few extra dollars? You know, did you see the pictures of the billionaire tech executives sitting around the table? Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg, Sam Altman, all of these tech CEOs who claim they are the best and the brightest that America has to offer, that we should believe in their technology because they are the ones who are doing right and doing good. They're sitting around the table praising Donald Trump. Does Mark Zuckerberg really need more money? What is Donald Trump going to do? Make him a centibillionaire rather than a double centibillionaire? Like, it's just ridiculous and it is disgusting, and we are watching the collapse of our democracy because the large institutions, the millionaire lawyers who don't want to make a few $100,000 less, the university presidents who are scared that their endowments will go from $8 billion to $7.5 billion, the media companies who just want to wring out a few extra dollars from another business, the billionaires for whom there is never enough money. Meanwhile, the people who are suffering in our cities, in our federal government, the people who healthcare is being ripped away from, and let us not forget, the people who every single day are watching the government of the United States be weaponized against them. So let's talk about that. This administration kicked off within days. The acting U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. sent letters to prominent Democratic elected officials, including Senator Schumer of New York, Congressman Garcia of California, threatening them with criminal prosecution. Think about that. Literally within days of Donald Trump taking the oath of office, his hand-picked U.S. attorney or acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia was already weaponizing government against his political opponents. Now, those two politicians, they stood up and Ed Martin backed down. Ed Martin, by the way, who before becoming the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia was a January 6th, a criminal defense lawyer for January 6th defendants and is an election denier. They stood up to him. He was ultimately left that position. Now he's leads a task force or something called the Weaponization of Government. I mean, if ever there was honesty in the Trump administration, it would be putting Ed Martin in charge of something called the Weaponization of Government. But anyway, they stood up to him. And then what do we see? We saw the Trump administration escalated through Alex Padilla, senator from California, to the ground for simply trying to ask a question at a press conference. It indicted a state court judge in Wisconsin. It indicted a member of Congress, a Democratic member of Congress, Congresswoman MacGyver from New Jersey. She remains under indictment. Why? Because she had the audacity to do her job. She had the audacity to do the thing that congressional statutes tell her to do, which was to visit an ICE detention facility in her district that the administration wasn't all that keen on her visiting. And when they tried to block her way, they claim, but you ought to just, the right wing likes to say, do your research. This is one of those where I'll tell you, you do your research. Go look at the video of it. She was doing her job, and she's been indicted. Now we are watching instance after instance, whether it is Cook on the Federal Reserve Board or Tish James on the Attorney General of New York, whether it is John Bolton. Now, I know many of you don't like John Bolton. I'm no friend of John Bolton's. John Bolton, worked in the first Trump administration. But what do those three people have in common? The Trump Department of Justice is weaponizing the criminal justice system to try to prosecute his political opponents. Now, why are they doing that? It is not just because they're trying to weaponize government. That's one reason. But it's because they're trying to stifle dissent. These are people who all in their own ways are saying things and doing things that Donald Trump doesn't like. I mean, it is quite remarkable that one of them is a Federal Reserve Board governor who's apparently going, he wants to take down because she won't lower interest rates at the level that he wants. He's going after Tish James in New York. He's going after John Bolton. Why? Because John Bolton is now a critic of his. It is not, in John Bolton's case, for example, about anything other than going after people who are dissenting. The same thing that the comedians are doing on late night TV. And look, it's not going to end with the comedians or the late night TV hosts. Donald Trump wants Kimmel off the air, sure. He wants Colbert off the air, sure. But it's not going to end with just that, or even, by the way, with ABC News giving him favorable coverage. I mean, I don't know how many of you watched the exchange between him and an ABC News reporter the other day, in which he was just attacking the ABC News reporter, and the ABC News reporter was just kind of standing there. He's going to go after these folks' broadcast licenses. He's going to say that if you air programming that I don't like because it is critical of me, Donald Trump, then you shouldn't be on air. He's going to say that if you cover the election in a way that I don't like, you shouldn't be on air. Now, look, you don't have to take my word for it. Just go look at what Donald Trump has already said. Just look at what he's already said about broadcast licenses. And that's taking entire networks off the air. That's like you go to check out your sports, the NFL, and the local broadcaster's gone because they've lost their license. And if he's willing to do that for broadcasters, just imagine what he's going to be willing to do elsewhere. It is not just that they are going after big figures. It's not just that they're going after politicians. It's not even just that they are trying to stifle dissent through making examples of people. Because after all, when you see in the news that they're going after someone, a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to speak up. I mean, I have a lot of people, I was sued by Donald Trump for racketeering in 2022, along with a bunch of other people. I didn't make a settlement. It never occurred to me to compromise. I would never in a million years have bent a knee. I fought in court and we won. And not only do we win, Donald Trump right now is in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. His lawyers are trying to overturn that victory. I'm not trying to settle the case. I got nothing to offer him. I got nothing to offer him other than another court judgment saying he's wrong. And that will hopefully not only resolve this, but it will hopefully give an example to other people about that there is an alternative path to capitulation. But every time you see that these folks get targeted, and particularly when you see them get targeted and then, settle cases or compromise or say, we did this accommodation, but it's not that big of a deal. Like, what message does it send to the rest of America? What message does it send to you, right? It sends the message, well, maybe there's danger in standing up. Maybe there's danger in holding a sign at a rally. Maybe there's danger in dissenting from what Donald Trump wants you to believe is true, but is in fact a lie that he wants to make the pillar of the state. And so that's bad enough. But his next phase, the thing we're watching right now, is him targeting the institutions, the next round of institutions that allow dissent to be possible. What do I mean by that? The media doesn't make dissent possible, right? With all due respect, CNN was never the dissent network, right? Like, even in the heyday of Zucker, it was not a dissent vehicle. Well, it would have on people who were in the opposition to Donald Trump, but it would have people on from Donald Trump. Even MSNBC, it's not in the business of dissent. Like, there are several hosts on MSNBC I quite like, and I do go on their broadcasts in order to express my dissent. But that's not their business. Their business is being a television network. But there are institutions whose business is dissent. And those are mostly nonprofits. They are organizations that fund free speech. They are organizations that promote positions that may not be popular with the government. They are a legal organization that defend people who express unpopular opinions. And this is where the administration is going next. Now, you don't have to take my word for that. Just take their word for it. Go read what J.D. Vance said. Go read what the Attorney General of the United States said. And of course, you can always read what Donald Trump says. They are next going to target the organizations, the nonprofit organizations, the funders, the people, the philanthropists, the philanthropy organizations that allow there to be space for there to be dissent, that host conferences at which dissent is discussed. They publish news outlets like Democracy Docket, like we do, that promote opinions that are not in favor with the administration. I'm not talking about the big legacy media. I'm talking about pro-democracy, independent media. And by the way, now would be a great time for you to support Democracy Docket as a pro-democracy independent media organization. The link to that is in the description below. But if we don't support these independent organizations, it's going to be harder and harder to read dissent. But anyway, he's targeting the infrastructure that allows dissent to take place. What do they talk about? They say, well, there are these groups that are funding protests. Well, first of all, there really are not groups, quote unquote, funding protests. I mean, you've all been to protests. Did anyone give you a check? No, you showed up yourself, you marched, you protested. But there are some costs associated with protests. Some places you need, for example, a permit, or you need to post a bond, or you need to have insurance, right? So there are some costs. And if you shut down those things, if you say, hey, insurance companies, you cannot insure a protest, it is going to be harder to have a protest. If you tell cities, we're not going to fund, we, the federal government, won't give you funding for your police if you, allow them to work overtime to defend or to monitor, to be involved in facilitating protests, like, it's going to get very hard. So there's a lot of things that the Trump administration is planning to do, is already doing, executive orders, policies, memorandum, internal plans. Some of them are public. Some of them are not yet public. Some of them are going to come out. I am not here peddling conspiracy theories. I'm not here to tell you I know what's in all of them. Okay? I know what they say publicly. And I can apply a certain modicum of common sense to take them at their word that when they say they plan to do these things, that's what they plan on doing. And not the sort of glossed over version, not the one that gets cleaned up after the Attorney General says what she really means, by a press spokesperson. I mean what they actually say. And we all need to be paying attention to the things they actually say. Because what is coming next is going to be this attack. So I mentioned they are going to go after nonprofit organizations. Again, don't take my word. They've said they're going to go after nonprofit organizations. They've actually picked out individual nonprofit organizations and funders that they say they're going to try to shut down. I mean, if that isn't chilling enough, I mean, if they can shut down a billionaire, what do you think they can do to you? What do you think they can do to me? What do you think they can do to Democracy Docket? Right? So they've already said they're going to go after the big funders, the big nonprofits. Why? Because they don't want there to be dissent. They're going after the comedians. You know, one of the sayings that I have adopted and internalized comes from Andrew Breitbart, who was a right-wing publisher. He founded the publication Breitbart. But he was spot on right. He said politics is downstream from culture. Politics is downstream from culture. You know, this is something many of us in the Democratic Party and the left, we don't always fully get right. We think policy is the most important thing. We think that if we lead with a series of good policies, the voters will come with us. They think that if we explain to them why it is that cutting Medicare is bad for them, if we explain to them that tariffs are bad for them, that will create more Democratic voters. And look, it does to some extent. I'm not faulting the people who talk about policy because policy should be important. But you need to understand politics is downstream from culture. Culture is the most important thing. When people talk about how, you know, Democrats should have gone on podcasts, what they were really saying is Democrats should have engaged in a culture and then talked politics, as opposed to the other way around. And so it is no coincidence that Donald Trump is targeting culture. He started by targeting culture through the Smithsonian museums. Remember that whole thing? Like he wanted to change the exhibits because he didn't want it to reflect negatively on the United States. He didn't want it to reflect positively on minorities. He attacked the Kennedy Center, which is the leading culture institution, probably in the whole country. Now, if you're in New York City, you know, just shush. Okay, I'm not saying that it is the best culture in the country. You can have Broadway, you know, you can have, you know, whatever you want, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Chicago, like everyone can say that they have the best culture in their city. That's fine. What I'm saying though is that the Kennedy Center is the leading culture institution because it's in Washington, D.C. It is of the idea of Americanism and American greatness in culture, like the Smithsonian museums. And he attacked that too. He attacked it because he wants to destroy the culture that allows dissent to take place. He's going to target Hollywood. Like, yes, he's targeting comedians. He's going to target all of Hollywood. You know, there are always these things about how, like, because movies want to sell their movies internationally, like they can't say certain bad things about certain countries because otherwise, like, they'll be banned from showing their movies in those countries. That's what Donald Trump aspires for here. I mean, he hasn't said this yet, but I'm like just applying some basic common sense. He's going to want Hollywood not to offer portrayals of things like January 6th that are negative about January 6th. He is going to want positive portrayals of him and his family. Hello, Jeff Bezos and Amazon Movies and the deal that he made to spend, I think it was $40 million on a biopic of a member of the Trump family. It is already happening, but it's going to happen even more. The Federal Communications Commission sits on top of a lot of these culture and media organizations because a lot of these culture and media organizations have needs one way or the other for broadcast licenses or other things that are regulated by the FCC. And if there's one thing we know, the current FCC chair does not care about free speech, does not care about the public interest, does not care about any of the things that you would think the Federal Communications Chair should care about. He cares about effectuating what Donald Trump wants. If Donald Trump wants a settlement from CBS, he's going to hold up their merger until CBS pays up. If he wants Jimmy Kimmel gone, he's going to say Jimmy Kimmel should be gone or else maybe something bad will happen, Disney, to your licenses. Now, this is, by the way, not letting off the hook Disney or Paramount CBS. Like, I have nothing but contempt for them for not standing up. And by the way, if one of these big institutions stood up, I suspect Donald Trump and the rest of them would back down and then they'd move on. But instead, by capitulating and capitulating and capitulating, it just sets an incentive structure. So I think you're going to see a lot more activity targeted by agencies like the FEC, like the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, which Donald Trump has already said he believes he has the power to control what their policies are. The FEC is set up to be a bipartisan commission with an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, where you cannot do anything at the FEC without some bipartisanship. It is structurally set up that way. Donald Trump doesn't care about any of that. Donald Trump thinks bipartisanship is for suckers. He doesn't think the law applies to him. Now, my law firm and I, we sued him over that with respect to the FEC, and we sued him over that with respect to the Election Assistance Commission, which has more to do with the voting process. We know that Donald Trump is going to try to crack down on the voting process and crack down on dissent in the voting process. What is dissent in the voting process? It's people who vote against him and the Republicans, right? When it comes to voting, dissent just means you vote for the other guy. He wants to take control of ballot counting because he views accurate voting results as a form of dissent that he will not tolerate. There's a reason why central to Donald Trump's pathology, the uncompromising part of the MAGA movement, is election denialism. There's a reason why it's called the big lie, because Donald Trump wants to make the lie a pillar of the state. And that means lies not just about the media and law firms, not just about universities and government workers, not just about culture, not just about Hollywood, but also about elections. In fact, maybe more than anything else about elections. When we start to talk about cracking down on dissent, we have to understand that what starts upstream of politics, culture, ultimately ends up in politics and in elections. And so that's the reason why I keep writing about the 2026 elections. It's the reason why I've posted videos on this channel about the 2026 elections. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please do so right now. Click the button in front of you and also hit that bell to make sure you are kept up to date every time we post new content. But the reason why I keep doing these videos and coming back to elections is because what's going to happen in 2026 is going to be the results of this project that he is engaged in to crack down on dissent. And yes, Jimmy Kimmel is maybe the latest part of that, but he is only a step in that chain. Donald Trump wants Jimmy Kimmel and Colbert off the air, not just because he is critical of Donald Trump, but because of what they may say about Donald Trump and others that may impact Donald Trump's ability to keep a hold on political power. That's also why he's doing redistricting. That too is about crushing dissent. The dissent are the voters who Donald Trump doesn't like. Okay? So this idea of crushing dissent, you have to understand it holistically. Okay? It is not just about big institutions, but it is about them. It's not just about government workers, but it is about them. It's not just about protests at Tesla dealers, although it is about that. And it's not just about elections, but it is centrally also about that. So look, I promised you at the beginning of this video that if you stayed to the end, I was going to tell you the most important things we can do to fight back. Solzhenitsyn said something else about the big lie. He said, quote, "The simple step of a courageous individual is not to try that again. Solzhenitsyn told us something else about the lies. Quote, "The simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world." Okay, that's what he said. One word of truth outweighs the world. Now, there are a number of different ways to think about what Solzhenitsyn is telling us. But part of what he is telling us is that regardless of where we stand on any issue, on any candidate, how powerful our voice is, or whether we are speaking only to ourselves and our family. It is the power to tell the truth. I mean, just tell the truth. Like, don't shade it, don't color it, don't dress it up, don't hedge it, don't qualify it. Just tell the truth. Donald Trump's an autocrat. Not some people say Donald Trump's an autocrat. Donald Trump is trying to crack down on dissent. Not critics claim Donald Trump is trying to crack down on dissent. The ability of us to just tell the truth about what Donald Trump and the Republican Party are up to is our superpower. It is a superpower that very few people in the legacy media are using. Like, now that I've given you those formulations about critics say this or whatever, like, you'll see that all over headlines in the legacy media and the way in which they talk. You see it, frankly, too often among politicians. There's a whole lot of my colleague this, my respected dear friend that. Like, let's just tell the truth. Okay, the Republicans on Capitol Hill are trying to throw poor people off of health care and take their money and give it to rich people. Let's just say that. Donald Trump is trying to crush dissent. It's not about, you know, a horrific murder. It's not about CBS losing money on Colbert. He just is trying to stifle dissent, and these corporations are amoral, and they're willing to go along with it because they want the money. Like, in some ways, I'd actually be much more respectful of them if they would just say something along the lines is, we would, on balance, like to report accurately without fear or favor. But honestly, that's kind of secondary to us just making money. And the way we're going to make money is we're going to become bigger and bigger. We're going to cut costs by firing employees. And we're going to sell you more and more schlock. And if they just said that, like, honestly, I'd kind of let them off the hook. But they don't say that, right? So the ability to tell the truth and to insist that our institutions and leaders tell the truth is probably the most important thing we can do. The second thing, though, is we need to build a new opposition. Now, I have been calling for us to build a new opposition movement now since before Donald Trump took office. It has had some success, but not as much success as I hoped it would by this point. But it is vitally important we do this. What is the difference between resistance and opposition? It is the scale, the scope, and the timeline. We are not going to get out of this in the next year. Even if we sweep the midterms, we're not out of this. Even if Donald Trump loses in 2028, we are not out of this. You know, I did an event with Democracy Docket, where I had for Constitution Day, and we had these leading scholars of the Constitution. And then we went to audience questions, and the first question we got was from Larry Tribe, who is probably the most accomplished and recognized leading constitutional scholar alive today, on either side, on any side. He is a liberal, but just a towering figure in the field of constitutional law. And the question he asked was essentially, what do you think the chances are within 10 years of Donald Trump leaving office, we will have restored the norms and institutions of democracy? And it was interesting for myself to digest that question in front of this audience. It was interesting to hear the guests digest it. But it's the right question in this sense. It is the right question in that we need to build an opposition movement that is not about just stopping the next thing that is happening today or tomorrow or next week. We need to build an opposition movement that can answer that question about what it looks like 10 years after Donald Trump leaves office. Yeah, what does it look like? What does democracy look like on the other side of this? Because it's not going to look the same as it is now. It's not going to look the same as it was 4 years ago. It's going to look different. And so we can either work towards making it better, or we can we could work towards keeping the status quo, but the status quo is not going to be an option. It's going to be different. And so we can bring vitality into this movement while we oppose Donald Trump and have in a sense, a luxury of not just saying that what he is offering is wrong, but actually offering something else that is right, that is not just a restoration of what was. So we need to all really be invested in building a new opposition. And that is a timeline issue. Okay, that is not about like this video. It is about the next 1,000 videos. You know, it's not just about what's in Democracy Docket or your favorite pro-democracy independent newsletter. Today, it is like, what is the arc of this into the future? The third thing we have to do, and I implore all of you to do this, is to stop punching down. Stop making this a critique about what Democrats are not doing enough of or are doing enough of, whether people in the pro-democracy movement have it exactly the way you would have it or would have it slightly differently. Okay? The problem we face right now is an existential threat to democracy by an authoritarian named Donald Trump. Every moment you spend criticizing a Democrat, you are not spending that time criticizing Donald Trump. I know this is not the most popular thing I'm going to say, but I'm just going to say it because it's true. And I remember number one was just tell the truth. So this is my truth. Here it is. There'll be plenty of time for you to decide whether you think this Democrat or that Democrat have it more right or more wrong. What I know this is that every single member of the House and Senate who are Democrats stand up every single day against Donald Trump. They may not stand up the way you want them to stand up. They may not be as bold as you always hope they would be, but they always stand up. And what I know even more true than that is that there is not a single Republican in government today, certainly not in the House and Senate, but pretty far and wide, who ever stands up to Donald Trump. So stop wasting your energy trying to make the perfect Democrat, the perfect progressive, the perfect liberal, the perfect pro-democracy organization, and start focusing your energy on lifting up those people who are doing the hard work. You can pick which ones you want to lift up. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be a cheerleader for every Democrat or for every progressive organization or for every pro-democracy group. I'm just saying, pick the ones you want to and lift them up. And if you want to lodge criticism, lodge it over there to my right. Okay? Lodge it at the people who are trying to rip it down, not the people who may be imperfectly in your eyes trying to build it up. And then finally, we need to invest in smaller institutions. There's a great book. It's not the easiest thing to get through, but it's a really good, intellectually interesting book called Anti-Fragile. And we'll put a link in the description below for people who want to read it. It was the second book by the author who wrote the more bestseller, more approachable book called Black Swan. And in Anti-Fragile, he basically makes the following argument. The opposite of fragile is not robust. That the problem that institutions have is that you want to resist force, right? You want to resist attack. You want to resist, bad things happening. So what you do is you sort of wrap the thing in bubble wrap. Okay, right? You try to make it stronger. You try to, harden it. When really what you want to be doing is making it anti-fragile. What's anti-fragile? Anti-fragile are institutions that get stronger under stress, right? So muscles are anti-fragile, right? The act of tearing the muscle, right? The act of working out and creating those small tears actually makes it stronger, right? That's anti-fragile, right? You're not protecting yourself from working a muscle. You're working it precisely to put it under a lot of stress because in the process of being put under stress, it gets stronger. And so we need to be building more anti-fragile institutions. And one of the things that anti-fragile institutions all have in common is that they are smaller, right? The fact is that Democracy Docket is more immune from the pressures of the Trump administration than CBS News. Right? And that is not intuitive unto itself. Like in a normal world, people would say, well, CBS News has all these lawyers and all of these editors and all of these businesses. And so it is super robust and it can withstand anything. And Democracy Docket, it relies on voluntary subscriptions by, people who are loyal to Democracy Docket and find it useful and get good information from it and want to support its mission. And so how could you possibly say that Democracy Docket is stronger than CBS News? And yet what we've learned over the last few months is that Democracy Docket's anti-fragile and CBS is fragile. We are not subject to the ancillary pressures that are what destroy robust and protected institutions. And it's not just Democracy Docket. This is true across the ecosystem of media. It is true across a lot of ecosystems. A lot of anti-fragile is about the banking system and how if you had just a multitude of small banks independent from one another, you wouldn't have as many financial crises. It's a really good book. I recommend you read it. Like I said, it's a little hard to get through at times, but it's worth the read. For our purposes, the way we resist the crackdown on dissent is to not look to large institutions, but rather to look to smaller institutions, each of which is doing hard work. So you need to identify the smaller institutions that you support, whether they are organizations that do protesting, they're organizations that do knocking on doors, they're organizations that focus on a particular issue you care about. There are organizations like book clubs that help educate you. There are organizations like your bridge club. There are organizations like your meetups, your bowling leagues, your democracy dockets, right? They're smaller things, and those will be the things that I think will survive and will help be the building blocks of this new opposition. And I think if we do all of those things, if we do each and every one of those things, then we will get through this dark time. It is going to be hard. I said this to someone this morning who was like, I can't believe how bad it is. I said, it is going to get worse. I mean, we are still only in the first months of the first year of Donald Trump's 4-year term. It is going to get worse. But the question is not whether it's going to get worse. The question is, how are we going to react? Are we going to react by joining those who are cowering in fear? Are we going to react by trying to prop up these large institutions that have failed us? Are we going to voluntarily agree to have our dissent silenced? Or are we going to stand tall, stand proud, speak out, and speak out the truth? Because if we do that, as Solzhenitsyn said, that truth will outweigh the world.